everybody, Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to start a new topic, and that topic is flow on the change grid. So a great many people are familiar with the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who years and years ago proposed flow psychology as the psychology of optimal experience. And it's very, very popular. Obviously, the man has great academic credentials. Offhand, I forget what university he's affiliated with, but very, very well known. I'll just look it up and tell. But nevertheless, so I thought, well, why don't we do a deep dive into flow psychology, see where it actually overlays on the change grid. And as we always want to do when we're doing, this activity we refer to as the merging of brilliance. So what we're trying to do is we stumble across new models, new ideas, whatever. We want to look at it by itself to say, yes, it has merit. And then we can say, if I try to overlay it on the change grid, how readily does it fit? And assuming that it does fit, and it virtually always does, then in what ways does that model further enhance our understanding of the change grid and tension management principles? And how might our change grid and our tension management principles return the favor and enhance what that model, the model for flow, is really all about? So that's the spirit when it comes to the merging of brilliance. Any thoughts, comments before we move into the subject matter? Nope. Okay, fine. How many of you are familiar with flow? You can chat something over to me if you want. You can just unmute and say, this is my background with flow. In fact, I'm kind of curious, Brian, how did you come to know about flow?
As part of the research, and when we were having a dialogue on about health, and I'm looking at this aspect of culture of health in terms of well-being within organizations and how people operate. So I call it corporate athlete. And so I was just looking at different research, because to me, if one is going to be happy, healthy, and whole, there's a certain amount of flow in those various areas that T had mentioned. Right. So the social aspect, the mental aspect, the emotional aspect, the physical, certainly, and all those things converge together, maybe not necessarily all at once. And so I was just looking up different research, and that came up in terms of this champion skill ratio that I never, or a challenge skill ratio that I never heard, but immediately I thought of the change grid.
Wow, right. And we can certainly see how it goes. I did just look him up. That he passed away this past October.
Right.
Yeah, he was 87 years old. So yeah, anyway, so this is something he really devoted his life to. And so I do think it's interesting, because when you look at the original diagrams he presented in his book, Flow, the Psychology of Optimal Experience, I think that was its official title. He didn't really make a whole lot of mention about dimensions. He basically just said that flow occurs whenever you are in a situation where your ability is being put to the test, where there's a match between high levels of ability and high levels of challenge. And, that's it. So keep those things in balance, and you're going to end up in flow. And pretty much, from what I remember, if you guys remember differently, please chime in. He just kind of said flow is, it's a state. Well, when we apply that concept to the change grid, we have to kind of ask ourselves, where does it fit? Where does it overlay? And what might we be able to add to it? And so I'll just ask you guys the blunt question. What is flow? Where is flow on the change grid?
Power.
It's in power. Let's get really specific. Where else in power? Where?
Out and up.
A little bit out and a little bit up. That resonates very much with what we were talking about before I started the recording, that to truly be in flow, you need to have challenge be ever so slightly higher than the ability to handle the challenge. So it's a little bit of a stretch or whatever. What's the line called directly through the center of the change grid?
Heart line.
And so the heart line is the place in the change grid where perceived challenge and perceived ability are in perfect balance. So to end up on this horizontal line, if I kind of drew it straight across, if to end up on that line, you have to be in a situation where your perceived challenge and your perceived ability are in perfect balance. Now, pardon me, not COVID. Okay, so my question for all of you, first I'll say, Csikszentmihalyi describes that as being a single state. You are in flow or you are not in flow. And when we first tried to integrate this, we said, there's more to it than that. Are we supposed to believe that all flow experiences are equal to one another? What do you guys think about that? So I can be in flow at 2-2. I can be in flow at 5-5, at 8-8, at 10-10, at 12-12. Is there any difference at all in that flow experience as I am looking at it on the heart line from in-grid to out-grid? What would you guess? Tell me about it. What makes it?
I want to say, this is me thinking out loud. This is not serious, but I want to say there may be a difference in nature, intensity, and duration of a respective flow state.
Ooh, do tell us a little bit
Nice.
more. Yes, that's very
Very
well
nice.
done. Very well done. And here I was about to just talk about the intensity part. Go right ahead, Monsieur. Tell us about the other two parts.
And that's from a newcomer too. So
I'm
that's
saying.
That's why they call it the circle of brilliance.
Exactly.
Hey,
Room in the
y'all can't see it, but I'm over here blushing.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. All right, so
That-
let's hear it. What are the three factors?
Well, yeah, nature, intensity, and duration. Again, this is thinking out loud, but if ability and challenged are linked, but it's 1-to-1 or 2-to-2, then the nature and intensity of that, well, I guess, and the duration could demonstrably be lower, less. There's less of a I guess, perceived depth to it. So that's as far as I got. I would love to hear other thoughts and add on.
You are absolutely tracking. That's really, really okay. Good. Let me throw up another layer. Did I ever make a layer with the two on top of each other? Lo and behold, he did. So this is just a diagram that overlays the 5 levels of productive tension on that layer of the change grid with the intensity band. So the further out grid you go, the more intense whatever it is you're experiencing. And that is going to hold true for all levels of tension. So right now we just happen to be talking about what's going on along the heart line of power. And so we can kind of go like, well, yeah, there's a difference between a 2-2 and a 5-5 and a whatever, that, further out grid you go, the more our word would have been intense it's going to experience. So you're not only going to be, if you're out here somewhere, 6 degrees or 7 degrees of intensity, you're definitely going to be the poster child of the driven driver kind of energy. That's intense. That's really intense. Well, similarly, just be up in stress for a second. Again, this year, I think by now you're starting to kind of see how these things all overlay, but stress is really far up grid. Well, I can be in stress way down here where I say the perceived level of challenge is a 1 and my level of ability is a 0.3. Okay, so whatever, if that's even possible, you can't even plot there, but right there, like ability of 1 for a challenge of 3, I'm still right on the brink of stress. Am I supposed to believe that that's the same experience as having a challenge of 12 and an ability of 1?
Right.
No.
And see, I think that's what he was trying to measure. And to Nasir's point, how do you say the flow guy's name?
It's Csikszentmihalyi. It's Mihai,
Yeah.
Csikszentmihalyi.
Mahai. Yeah. And so he was credited for this experience sampling method. And he literally used a pager. So random times throughout the day, situationally, people were sent this little page and they were to try to answer these questions and how they're experiencing flow in that moment. And he had difficulty measuring that. So that's why I was thinking about the change grid as a tool to really help with that, because it does look at things situationally.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So yeah, so let's kind of figure out how, I mean, he doesn't know that my work existed. I'm in a totally different world. I mean, I had no interest in academics and doing scientific research around this and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to know, is it practical? Can I help companies use this to do whatever they're trying to do a bit more effectively? Can people self-apply this to better manage their own level of productivity or master change in their own life? I mean, I wanted it to be practical. And to me, the fact that it just made sense and it just felt right and it seemed to agree with lots of other things was proof enough for me. So when I read the book that Brian sent out to me, and Brian, I don't know if you can distribute that to everybody, but it's one of the, I forget what the publication date was, but it's one of his more recent, later kind of works. Yeah, but the whole thing's research. It's solid, and I'm glad because and it actually just validates the change grid. So yay! But it's the research part of it. I just wanted it to be practical.
Can you put that in the chat, like a PDF?
I think you can. I
That's
think
what
you
it
can
is.
drag the PDF file to chat.
Okay, I'll try it and see.
Yeah, see, because I don't know how
T,
big that
T, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are there descriptors to the levels of intensity?
There aren't. I mean, I have them, but I've never written them up as a reference guide. But it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things that I'm trying to flesh out and finalize by summer's end is what the training is that comes along with someone joining the Oracle of the Self. So what diagrams are they going to need? And so these are lay people. These aren't people that are even hobbyists when it comes to self-development or whatever. This could be their very first exposure to it. So I think they really do need reference guides and cheat sheets and all those good sorts of things. So I thought about putting together a brief reference guide for each of the different layers, like we did for the 5 levels of tension. So there you go. So no, I don't, and maybe I will. So, all right. So you want to help me with it, David?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted.
Yeah, because
I'll get my thesaurus out and we'll have a cocktail.
Well, there you go. Yeah, and really, I'd like to finish the adjective map. That's one of the things that's on my bucket list. It's like I've got the adjective map has room for 1,440 adjectives, and I have about 1,100 on it right now. So there's room for a few hundred more. And so I'd love to finish that adjective map as one of my bucket list items. Anywho, I want to get back to something else Nasir said, though. The other 2 parts are nature and duration. So I'm going to throw something out. I've not really thought this through. So you guys chime in if you want to agree, disagree, add something, whatever, feel free. But it seems to me that duration is having an impact on my perceptions of, or my actual experience of, the challenge that the situation represents. So I kind of see duration as being something that would probably be factored in to a person's assessment of the challenge that they face. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with that? So the longer I got to do it, the more, well, depending on what it is, could move me upgrid or outgrid. You guys think about duration? And while you're pondering all that and getting ready to unmute, I'll share my an actual experience with it. So I've been doing my cardio, and my trainer wants me to be doing 30 minutes of cardio on the treadmill at 2.5 miles per hour at a 15-degree incline. So when I first tried that, you could give it up. There's no way I could do a 15-degree incline for 1 minute. But I started off and I would do whatever I could do. So maybe I was going 2 miles an hour and it was at a 5-degree incline, whatever it happens to be. Well, one of the things that I noticed was that got my pulse rate up. And if I were to try to go higher, I said, I'm going to put it up to an incline of 10. Well, my ability was still the same. So that ability was very much being, what I want to say, tapped into, depleted. And as a result of that, the stress that my body was experiencing was going up. And so instead of my pulse rate being in the mid to high 20s, now it was in the low 130 beats per minute. And then I thought, well, he wants me to go to 15 degrees. What could 15 degrees possibly feel like? And so I took it all the way up to 15 degrees and my pulse rate was in the 140s. And so I think that's an example of what Nasir was saying, that if the burden is going up, and duration is certainly one way the burden can go up, incline raised the challenge, that made the burden go up, speed would have made the burden go up. So I'm just wondering, is duration a factor of challenge?
I would say so, because think about it from bios, right? So like when a patient comes, we're looking for baselines, and everyone has baselines, and this becomes the conditioning of what's called interoception. So that's how the nervous system monitors your internal with the external. So when something becomes abnormal, it raises up, these autonomous nervous system things like your blood pressure, your heart rates, and all those kinds of things. And when they're up long, I mean, it's going to send a signal to the amygdala, and you're going to feel like fear, anxiety, all those kinds of things automatically, because you're producing those neurochemicals in the situation. So duration, the intensity, definitely, because if you don't have a baseline for it, and people run into this every year when they do New Year's resolution. I never ran a marathon before, but that's the goal. And so instead of starting small, where they're going that 4% or 1% beyond their baseline, they're trying to go all out and run miles for the very first time. And it's too easy to check out because your body's just not going to take it, because you're not conditioned for it.
Right. And so, and then you might give up ever even trying to do some sort of incremental improvement to someday reach whatever that objective happens to be.
I also think that the intensity and the duration have a lot to do with imprinting.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that. Tell us about that.
Well, I just think, dive off a diving board and it's a little bit thrilling. Jump out of an airplane and have a 5-minute free fall, and I'll guarantee you that memory will be in your mind much more than the dive off the diving board.
Absolutely. Those are significant emotional events, and those are always better remembered, because remember, emotions, the way the body process them as a signal is immediate and is live and candid camera. So they're always better remembered than something that's neutral. And when we talk about building neuroplasticity, building neurons, it takes exactly what Nasir described. It takes alert, it takes intensity, it takes focus. So all of those things are key to actually building learning moments experientially, so that they linger. It's not a one-off thing from there. You'll want more of it.
And so are you saying that it's because the amygdala has gotten involved in the memory? And I'm just thinking, because it's like your body at a certain point, when it comes to the jumping out of the plane, says, we do not need to be doing this, and we are not going to do this again. And so we're going to make sure you never forget that this experience, so that you will know, avoid it in the future.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we're
think
jumping
about
off of the
everything,
diving board,
like when you have a memory, it just doesn't recall the event. It also recalls the actual emotion
That's right.
that you were experiencing.
Right,
And so anything could trigger that. A song or anything, could trigger those things.
Yeah.
And so I've got a question then, team. Doesn't the duration of time then carry us naturally through the flow of the grid?
Oh, tell us more about that. So
In other
at a certain
words,
point, duration might end up in apathy.
Yes, as a result of the time spent in the development of the skill or the competency, so that it begins over time to reduce the challenge and increase the ability.
That makes good sense too. I'll go back to my little treadmill story. Right next to the treadmill that I like to get on, there's another treadmill. The difference is that the other treadmill has the ability to go up to a 30-degree incline. I don't know how many of you are ever on treadmills and dealing with inclines, but a 30-degree incline, you almost need to get down on your hands and knees and crawl up that slope. So it's really tough. And so I said, why do they have something that goes up to a 30-degree incline? And he says, because if you stick with this long enough, 15 degrees is going to feel like nothing. And I think that's what you're saying. If 15-degree of incline puts you up in stress, as I'm sure would put most people up in stress, as you do it more and more, your ability goes up. As ability goes up, well, obviously you can see if I'm just moving diagonally, I'm still moving down grid. And it's not just a reduction in perceived challenge, it's also an increased level of ability. You have stronger cardiovascular health, et cetera. Those two things working together moves me further and further and further down grid. But if I'm now down grid about 15 degrees and you give me 30, I'll bet you I'm going to be back up in stress again.
Right.
But you know what's interesting, T, you take a marathon runner,
Yeah.
one of the Kenyans, one of the world-class runners, and you would think that running would become boring to them, or that they would slow down, but they keep getting better.
Yeah, I think that, Brian, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's because they love their dopamine.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so they do it.
Exactly.
I'm saying that, David, just to say that there is a neurochemical reward while they're doing it. And so
Yeah.
I think, when you're in one of these long endurance sports and people will, I forget the exact phrase they use, but at a certain point, their consciousness transcends the physical activity that they're performing.
Right.
And that high or that whatever. Brian, can you tell us what the neurochemistry is? And Nasir, it sounds like you've got your neurochemistry background too, so feel free to chime in.
Yeah, and so you think about things like acetylcholine, right? So acetylcholine puts the spotlight on the learning moment, and you're always trying to move that needle, so it becomes very experiential. So in other words, you're never done. There is no there. You win one race, but then you prepare for the next. And then neuroscience, when you talk about deliberate practice, then you're literally doing things for outcomes. And so when you look at like sports medicine research, they don't do normal goal setting that we do. They literally do something called outcome development, where they're looking for specific outcomes, and that makes their practice different, but it also makes how they engage and their perception of engagement different at different points when they need it. So they can RTV, we say, raise the bar at any given point in time in the event, and that's how they keep mastering going instead of it being a one-off event.
Interesting. Okay, Nasir, you also mentioned nature. So I'm kind of curious to know, what are they talking about, the natural environment impacting others? Or are they talking about you have a certain nature? So is it more about your qualities or the environment you happen to be in?
Ask that again. I think I know the question, but I want to make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. The question is, when you're talking about nature being one of the factors, is it nature as in what's happening in your environment, or is it something about your essential nature as the human you are?
Oh, that's
So
an
is it more
excellent
of a
question.
genetic thing, or is it more circumstantial?
When I said that those three components, the nature, intensity, duration,
Yeah.
I was thinking of nature as the internal experience of it. But
Okay.
your question is making me think of how the internal, is influenced by the external, how the inner.
Yeah. Well, and certainly if it was external, it would be a factor of perceived challenge. Because, you're looking around, since we're sticking with this running metaphor, if it's a marathon, is it a nice day? Are you in Phoenix in August? Where are you? And how hot is it? And is it raining? Is it what, all these things that are part of the environment, that natural part is certainly going to come into play as you go about gauging your own perceived challenge of it. And by the way, if a lot of times people perceive challenge as having a direct inverse relationship with ability. So if challenge is going to go up, well, ability has to go down. Or if ability goes up, challenge has to go down. And all of us on the call can tell you, nope, it's certainly possible.
I'm gonna be on my third porch. And
Oh, right, that was Edie. She just muted. I thought that could be an interesting little thing. Anyway, so so, but if you're talking about someone's internal human nature, something about the essence of who they are and how they're feeling and whatever ring, that would affect someone's ability. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
That internal nature is something that I own, or I'm stuck with it, as the case may be, but it's mine. And so
Right.
it's definitely an ability issue.
And it's probably a little bit of both, because remember, through interoception, the internal is always trying to keep and maintain homeostasis. So it's monitoring the external. That's
Right.
what gives you, and starts to formulate these neurochemical soup in terms of you measuring reasoning and doing reasonable things so that you don't go too far beyond your baseline, right?
Yeah.
So whenever the amygdala or cortisol, those kinds of things are emitted, immediately you're also emitting chemicals to try to balance them so that you don't go too far.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this interplay between both. Again, that's based on your conditioning, is based on your baseline.
Very interesting. So if we put it all together, then let's see if that's right, that as my internal resources, those are part of abilities. So whatever my mental state, whatever blessings I've been given genetically, as far as my neurotransmitters and hormones and all those other goodies are concerned, the more of that I have available to me, is that the way I'm putting it? That would increase my perceived ability greatly. And that could end up moving me into a more intense experience. Certainly, if duration gets grander and grander and grander and grander, perceived challenge is going up, intensity is going up at the same time. So that maps. So the more ability I have, no, that makes sense. The more ability I have, the more likely I am to have a low level of tension around whatever it is. So I can intensely not care, just as I can intensely fear something.
And so T, we have example of that in bodybuilding, right? So that if I don't change my weight, if I consistently bench press at 150,
Yep,
at some point my muscle development plateaus.
that's correct.
And I have to then, in order to continue that pattern of growth, I've got to increase the challenge.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why at a certain point they changed the whole concept of training to progressive resistance.
Right.
It's got to be, you can never go to the same workout again. You know, you got to increase reps or increase the weight or the number of sets, whatever it happens to be. The speed that you're doing it at, something's got to change, or you're just going to reach whatever level that'll take you to. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not, growth is no longer happening.
But you had to do it at a certain ratio. At least that's what they're talking about with that challenge skill ratio component, so that you don't overextend yourself, and that creates, makes you more susceptible to injury and all those different kinds of things. But you do it just enough so that you can promote the long-term aspect of growth. And that's the key for it.
Yeah,
is
to
that
build on it.
balance.
Yeah,
Right.
but you have to have it before you can build on it. So I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Okay, so the point of this whole little dialogue here is that not all spots along the heart line represent the same experience. So applying that now to flow, that there are varying degrees of flow. And so I'm going to describe the flow progression in ways that have always made sense to me. And you guys can certainly add in your own little metaphor if you want it. But when I think of flow, I always think of water. And so obviously flow is not only acknowledging that the water is there, but that something is happening to the water. What does the word flow imply is happening with the water?
That is
It's moving.
moving.
It's going somewhere. It's moving. Okay. And so it's flowing. And so I go like, all right, well, if I can think of all the different ways that water can flow, and I can kind of divide those along a continuum of intensity, then maybe I can make a good parallel into the human experience of flow. And so I think a very far in-grid flow, if you guys can see me wiggling around in here about what is 1 degree of intensity all about. Well, let's say that you have live in a part of the country that you get these little afternoon springtime showers, and the cloud comes over and it rains for 10 minutes and then it all goes away and the birds are chirping and the sky's clearing, and you see in the cracks of the sidewalk that there's a little trickle of water that's flowing down thanks to our good friend gravity to get it down to wherever it's going to ultimately enter the water supply. So that's flow. It's not much water and it's not moving very fast, but it's still water and it's still moving. And so there's a flow occurring. I'll also say that there's an efficiency that's happening there as well. We know that energy, in this case specifically water, will always follow the path of least resistance. So one way or another, that water is making continuous decisions whenever presented with an option. So when I get to a crack in the sidewalk, well, this crack is now encountering another crack. Should I continue down the crack I'm in, or should I try some of this crack? And so, there's decisions being made and actions being taken. And so there is a certain level, if you will, of intelligence that's happening there. If you can kind of make that connection there. Okay, well, let's say it's not a little afternoon shower. Maybe it's a big old storm, and suddenly you've got rain that you can actually watch sheeting down the driveway into the street, where you've actually got ripples of water heading down to the drain, and maybe it's even gathering up a little bit. Can you feel that's a lot more water? It's flowing a lot more quickly. So that's a different experience. That's more of an out-grid kind of experience. Continue that. If you have enough rain in enough places, suddenly your little mountain creeks might start moving water around as well. And the creeks will join into little tiny streams, and the streams will join into rivers. And all of these are greater and greater volumes moving faster and faster. But if you get all the way out to 6 and 7, now you're talking about storms at sea, giant waves that are moving, maybe even some kind of tsunami is coming your way. So sorry about the coughing, but I bring this up only to say that there are many different intensities of flow that can occur. And I believe that there exists a certain level of flow that can become destructive. So when we want to talk about the optimal flow experience, I don't think it's just about being 4 degrees above the heart line as far as challenge is going. I think it's also about where in intensity are you going to have the best flow experience. 1, 2, 3 is flow. 4 and 5, this is some pretty serious motion happening. 6 and 7, we got to start paying attention to what's going on. So, okay, Brian just texted everybody a little note. If you want to send, just text over to him his email, or send him an email and he'll forward it to you. Okay, any thoughts about what I just said there about water representing the different levels of flow intensity? Okie dokie. So let's talk then a little bit about, unless I missed it when I was reading Mr. High's work, I don't really think much is said about when the flow becomes damaging, when the flow becomes a bit too much. So before we talk about the science behind all that, have you guys ever experienced, or do you know of someone, a client or whatever, who is out there really doing good work, who's doing important stuff now, and it's very intense coming at them? They can handle that intensity. They're going through it. Are we to suggest that that doesn't carry a price tag?
Right, it definitely does. You see, that's what the burnout is.
That's
right?
what the burnout is.
In the name of productivity. So you're doing way too much, and you become so enmeshed in the moment that the consequence of, aftermath of becomes kind of blinded to it. And that's what I was looking at in the sports research, right? They talk about the prehabilitation that athletes use to help them prepare for the game, but equally as important is rehabilitation. So
Mm.
when I've been interviewing professionals for what I again call corporate athlete program, I'm asking them how do they prepare for their day, and then what recovery strategy they have to calm down from stress of the day.
Mhm.
No one has anything. So it's almost like you're playing a game like an athlete who's already worn themselves out before the big game. So you're not able to effectively manage the energy for the game that you're playing in front of you.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yep. So, all right. So what do we do with this? How do I, if I'm working with a client and I believe that spending some time talking about flow psychology might be interesting to them or useful to them, or I just set that label aside and I just talk a little bit about someone getting into a place of balance between their perceived ability and their perceived challenge. When I talk about getting on the heart line, getting into power, whatever, why am I doing that? And how do I go about doing that? Anyone want to throw out some ideas about why and how? Mhm.
Say that again. Repeat that question.
Yeah, why do I want to move someone into flow? How do I move them into flow? They're coming at me and maybe they're a little bit too far down grid. How do I get them back into flow? Maybe they're too far up grid. How do I get them back into flow?
Right, right. So they want to be productive. They want to produce something, but they can't do it if they're expending too much tension all at once,
Right. Or if they have too little.
or they have too little. And what's
Right.
interesting to me about the three components that Nasir mentioned, the nature, intensity, and the duration, is there's a narrative that goes with each one of those. And I
Mhm.
didn't see that in any of Mihilai's research, right? He didn't talk about the narrative of how they're characterizing the situations that he's trying to monitor, because that's the key important part of it to start with.
Mhm. Mhm.
The perspective and the perception, shapes that, because now we're talking about the identity and the behaviors that go along with that identity. So none of that was discussed in the research.
No, no. Well, and I'll just jump to the kind of conclusion I wanted to get to on this subject is that we believe, and I'm including almost all of you guys, giving you the benefit of the doubt, but that too much of anything is just as bad as too little of something. So we've got 4 problems, areas on the change grid that we want to stay out of. So yeah, we've been saying if your level of flow is too intense, if you're just too far out grid, that can have all kinds of damaging qualities to it. And again, we can go to the danger zones and look about what's happening in them if we want to get some labels around that. But do we really think that flow of an intensity of 1 is something we should be celebrating? I mean, I'm glad that you're having this really mellow, peaceful sort of flow experience, but do you guys think that's where like growth is going to occur? Or what do you think? Is that just not enough?
No.
No, because if we're talking about drive, remember that if we look at the vector north to south on the change grid, we're looking at the level of tension. If I'm looking at the horizontal vector, which we happen to call the heart line, that's all about the level of drive that someone has. So someone who's just got a 1 degree intensity does not have very much drive at all. And the further out grid you go, the more driven they become. So it gets to be pretty obvious. So I don't want too much, and I certainly don't want too little.
Mhm.
And even if we look at Csikszentmihalyi's work, he'll show you on his little diagrams that being too far up grid, so you're imbalanced, the challenge is far greater than your ability to handle it, that's going to mess with you. And the corollary is also true. If you've got too little challenge and too much ability, now you're too far down grid, and that's going to mess with you. So if I want someone to really be productive, I need to get them into power along the heart line. And because we use that word productive, we need to get them to be at least slightly out grid, because, when we talk about being productive, there is some sort of intention you have in mind. And so you got to focus on that intention and do what you got to do to get that intention taken care of. So that's, again, where we generally work. But if the question is, where on the change grid is the home of ultimate flow, where everything is coming to you and through you effortlessly? You are neither, where do you guys think? Where would that be? Where do you think the ultimate flow experience, where everything's just coming to you and through you?
I can describe the states. I'm trying to think of
Please
where
do.
it is on the
No,
because I get like that when I'm creating, like when I do research and I'm mind mapping, creating ideas, I get lost.
okay,
Like
tell us.
I don't even think about it. So in other words, I'm in a learning mode. Like I set an intentionality to learn something, to explore. That's what gets me into all of the research. And then I have these conversations and interviews with patients and different professionals at different stages of their job, of their lives. And so it almost seemed like I'm right there in that 5% maybe.
Right around 5 degrees, right? 5 degrees. Yep.
The challenge is not high. I know what I'm doing or know what I'm looking for. So there's,
Well, and just the acknowledgement that you're looking for something or you're trying to learn something carries with it the belief that your level of ability is not as high as you would like it to be, to either meet current challenges or to prepare you to meet future challenges. So that makes sense.
Right.
You're slightly upgraded. And to Jixim and Hai's work, that's great, because he was saying you got to be a little bit above the heart line in our lingo in order to have that get fully engaged.
Is that
So-
the Yerkes-Dodson law? Is that how you pronounce it?
Well, the
Is that what that is?
Yerkes-Dodson law is back to
Yerkes.
1908. And that was
Oh.
the first thing we were able to find where someone said that there was a direct relationship between stimulus and performance. And I could pull that diagram up to show you guys anytime you want to see it, but it's part of the Merging of Brilliance's, I guess, most recent summary. But anyway, it was the first model we talk about that was after 1900. We don't talk a lot about models that are historic or, coming from antiquity, but there's plenty of models of human behavior that goes back, 2000 plus years. So we just say, well, what have we been learning since 1900? And so the first one that made the cut there is the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U theory that says that there is a direct relationship between arousal and productivity. So that as your level of arousal increases, and as you can imagine, in 1908, arousal meant something very different than it means today. It just means sensory arousal. You've got, your eyes are active, your ears are active, everything's, on alert. You're, sniffing and tasting and whatever senses you've got, they're in full function. So the inverted U theory just said that when the level of arousal, sensory arousal, is too low or too high, that your ability to actually do anything with it goes down. Performance suffers. But when you're at a moderate level of sensory arousal, your ability to perform increases greatly. And so what we really want to do is to make sure people feel as though they have enough ability to meet this moderate challenge. And that's the first thing after 1900 that even gives a hint towards this idea about a certain level of productive tension. They say arousal, we would say it's about productive tension. So yeah, that's probably more of a reminder than you wanted. But again, if the question is, where is the ultimate flow? So Brian, go back to the scenario that you've shared with us. And you've done your research. You've had a great little trip down the rabbit hole. You've discovered lots of fun things. At a certain point in time, do you just close your books, close your eyes, and sit there in the moment?
yes, that in a way, I go through like a reflective feedback that kind of set the stage for the next event. And so, in other
Okay.
words, I'm trying to duplicate it again, or at
Mhm.
least to set the stage to duplicate it again. I never know if that's going to happen, but I get
Right.
excited about the questions and the inquiry that I set up for myself and see how close I came. And then if I did not achieve all that I want to achieve, that becomes part of reflection where I ask myself specifically, um, what did I learn? Or what do I need to learn more of? How can I grow? What do I need to develop? So those
Mhm.
3 questions kind of set the stage for what's to come.
Okay, and so now let's kind of translate that into movement along the change grid. And so you'd said you're out at like 5 degrees of intensity
Hmm.
out there in flow, good things happening, nice progress, all that good sort of stuff is happening. And then you said at a certain point, you decide to now turn inward and do a little self-reflection
Yes,
to prepare and improve, etc. So that means you moved in grid. Because
right.
remember in the center of the change grid, where's my background image right here? Oh, I forget that we put that one together. That's a good one. When I'm at the center of the change grid right here, we said that one of the things we want to do when we're working with our clients is to practice the art of, what's the rest of that phrase? Practice the art of caring.
Detachment.
Detachment, practice the art of caring detachment. I'm there to help somebody. I need to have complete observational skills that are noticing what there is to notice. And if I am connected to the situation or connected to their story in a way that my emotions are being engaged. So rather than just hearing the account, I'm actually experiencing it as they're going along. I'm feeling whatever they were feeling. We believe that that can undermine your effectiveness. So we need to keep our channels clear and wide open and clean. So we want to spend ourselves practicing that art of caring detachment, be in the center where we are fully aware of what's going on around us. We can tap into all the kinds of information that are heading our way, but we don't necessarily do anything with that information. We simply have it at that moment. Now, at a certain point, when we have enough of that information, we say, now, based on this information, does something need to change? And if something needs to change, do I need to move further out grid, which is what you actually described? Prepare yourself to be more effective the next time around. So that's what this little shift out grid is all about. But you might have just easily said, so now that I have everything, I know we've got everything under control, so we can relax a little bit. And you would have kind of said, nobody needs to do anything. We've just shifted down grid a little bit. So I
Yeah.
think that's what it really is, that real flow occurs in the center of the change grid, because one of the examples that I've given as I try to illustrate this for people is that you're looking at this stream, and the stream is water moving because it's a stream. And so, but in the middle of the stream, there's an island, not a big island, and you're sitting on it. It's big enough for you in a little blanket. So that's it. You're sitting there. The water's going around you, and whatever speed it's going, and all that. So you are in the flow. You're fully observant of the flow around you, but you yourself aren't wet. You're observing it. You're detached from it. And so you're going to notice things that you
Yeah.
otherwise might not be able to do. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a question that's akin to what Nasir put in the chats there.
Yeah.
So when I go back inward,
Mhm.
it seems like when I come out, and this is my goal actually, is to come out at a higher consciousness to, in
That's
other
right.
words, RTB, to raise the bar. And I learned that in martial arts. Like we were always told by our Sifu that you're never done. Like there is no there to get to. And so
Yeah.
in their mind, it's always this recycling of reflection, but the reflection becomes important on how you do it, how you engage there, so that you can come back out at a higher level.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, in fact, before I throw my 2 cents in, Nasir, do you want to unmute and share a little bit more about your comment about dynamic cycling?
Well, yeah, the on the previous slide that had the degrees, I was listening to Brian sharing his experience, And yeah, I was looking at oh goodness, there's another slide that has like I think awareness, intention,
Oh, yeah,
engagement,
yeah.
and
Engagement
execution.
links. Yeah,
Yeah,
engagement
so I
links.
was almost like in my mind overlaying those two on each
Yeah,
other and thinking, oh, well, there's maybe a cycling between 4 degrees, i.e. awareness, 5 degrees, i.e.
yeah,
intention, six
yeah.
degrees, i.e. engagement, and then maybe up to 6.5 of
Mhm,
execution that
mhm.
people are cycling through and we're always
That's right. That's
kind of
right.
growing through. So yeah, that was my thought verbalized.
That's very good, and I'm glad you're noticing that the change grid is actually the result of combining over 400 models of human behavior into a single model. And
Mm,
so, we said, no matter what model someone presents us with, if the model seems like it has merit all by itself, you got to believe it's going to have even more merit when you combine it with everything else that made sense standing all by itself. And so that's why we've over all these many years, we've recognized different models overlay on different layers, easy for our understanding, but ultimately it's just one composite diagram, and all these things are happening simultaneously. So yeah, very good that you observed that. Now, one other thing I do want to throw out to you guys about cycling, and I was going to go and see if I could find the diagram real quick, but I think I put it into the archives. So it's been several months ago, but remember we had a very robust discussion around spiral dynamics.
Yes.
Spiral dynamics was talking more about civilizations and societies and how values evolve over the period of time. And we've pretty much learned from that that you can see how society and cultures have had periods where something triggered a change to occur. They started doing something, they learned something, they came back to that starting point, different awareness to do something different the next time around. So the spiral goes around and around and around. Well, similarly to cultures and civilizations going through spiral dynamics, perhaps each individual has their own spiral dynamic. And you are definitely working your way around this outgrid moment where you're trying to make something happen. You've done something. Now you're going to become more analytical about it so you know what actually happened. So you can become more in-grid around it, become more reflective, more upgrid around about it to become more inspired. And that ultimately moves you around and around and around and around. Hopefully, as you become more fluent in managing your own levels of productive tension, you can make that cycle very fast. So you could just zip around it, around and around and around and around. So learning is just like an engine. But when people are first exploring something, they may be very far upgrid and then outgrid and then downgrid and ingrid. They're going through a much longer journey because they're not as familiar as they are with whatever the territory happens to be able to sooner or later zip around the middle of the change grid.
Mhm.
Okay, thoughts about that?
So is there not a natural path, but you know how you say like the change grid has a natural path, and you experience too much, and you go down,
Oh yeah, yeah.
out, you go
Natural movement is downgraded.
right. So is there such when we're cycling, I wonder?
Well, I would suggest to you that there are, if you are not in the center of the change grid, what's happening to your ability to cycle? So let's say, for example, instead of having the center of the change grid as your personal epicenter, let's say you live out here at 9-9.
Oh gosh, no.
Right. And so you're still learning, you go there to do something even more aggressive, which hits you in the face with some fact. And then you kind of, find someone to blame, but you still get enamored. And so, to be doing any kind of cyclical growth out here, or what if you're a full-blown narcissist in the outgrid danger zone? You're still learning, but it's a different experience with a different, I want to say, motivation underlying it, and on and
And
on.
it hits you differently too out there,
Sure
doesn't
does.
it?
Sure does. Sure does. And I mean,
Mm.
again, same stuff's happening upgrid. If I'm in the upgrade danger zone and I actually am facing some sort of true physical threat, well, yeah, I got to do something. And then I got to reflect at that work. I'm like, okay, but I could still be doing that whole learning cycle that Brian was talking about, but it's It's using a very different spot on the change grid as the epicenter of whatever that change may be. So do I need to cycle? Yes, but I think I need to cycle where I'm healthiest on the change grid.
So that centering is, I
Right.
call it like being a special ops,
Yep.
which is being observer and participant.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
can observe and participate and come from that perspective and have a more significant and effective impact.
Yeah, this is exactly right. So the center of the change grid is a very useful place for us to tap into. It's great if we can get to the center of the change grid very quickly whenever we need to. That's what the PowerPoint maneuvers are all about, being able to do something that immediately changes your state, moves you to the center of the change grid, and then you can re-evaluate what's going on from there. So great skill set, absolutely to have. But remember too, as we've talked about on several of our circle discussions, is that anyone who wants to be on more of a journey of personal growth and spiritual growth and want to do things like meditate and whatever form it takes, if it takes the form of prayer or a meditation in motion or whatever it is, it's really all about developing a practice to cultivate the center of the change grid experience, where you can be in the world but not of it, where you can be experiencing something but letting the winds of heaven dance around you. So you are observing it all, but at least in that instant, it's not affecting you. Now, that doesn't mean that you can wallow there, because you're living and life occurs off center. Life occurs out here between the green and the red circle. So most of my time as a human is going to be spent places other than the center. And if I want to live a lifetime at the center of the change grid, tell me what kinds of, who are those people? Who are the people? What was that?
Monks.
Monks. These are monks. These are people that are, entered a monastery where they're, maybe it's a cloistered kind of a group, so they have little, if any, real interactions with others. Okay, fine. You got to believe that that's a very difficult job, just because of the amount of silence you've got to become comfortable with, or that amount of isolation. So how much of your time is really being spent on PowerPoint thoughts versus how the heck did I get myself trapped into this situation?
So T,
Yeah.
you just caused a question for me, certainly a thought.
Yeah.
And that is it that in life that the PowerPoint is the position that we seek in life? Like you said, we're oftentimes, as you said, outside of the green circle.
Yeah.
And trying to answer these tough life questions and find that perfect balance in life where, we're comfortable and we're content.
Yeah.
This seems to be what we often are either consciously or unconsciously seeking.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Remember that one of the, when we're working with a new client, at the very least, we do want to say, we need to figure out two things. Where are they on the change grid as far as whatever this issue happens to be they want to talk about, and where on the change grid would best serve them, where the desired outcome would happen more naturally. So I would say to you that if I'm working with a client who says, I want to be able to relax, I want to be able to calm down, I want to lower my blood pressure, I want to get the negative voices out of my head, I want to change those tapes that are always playing, all this, they're telling me that what they want is help being moved mid-grid, moved to the center of the change grid. If on the other hand, they said, well, no, I want to get a job promotion, I want to have a more successful relationship, I want to accomplish ABC, whatever. Well, that's not the center of the change grid. We might move into the center for a quick moment to help their thought process, but they want to move out grid. They're trying to get something done. So I got to help them get more intentional, or get greater clarity around their intentions, get them out there into engagement, and certainly get them engaged in doing those right things. And I got to get them to execute it without becoming arrogant and too full of themselves. So that's where I'm trying to move them for that. So I would say to you, Tim, that over the course of my career, I don't know, 90 8% or more of all of my work has been with corporations. They tend to hire me to help people get some out-grid stuff happening. But if I was working with individuals, if I was a coach or if I was serving as some sort of a mentor and they wanted to be focusing on personal growth and development or spiritual growth and development, well, that's mid-grid. That's where I would be really trying to help people move and all that. And I think those are the two reasons why people tend to hire us.
So
Maybe we get in, if we're a consultant and they've got some wacko crisis going on, they're bringing us in to calm everyone to get it all done. I can't think of a time. Oh, no, nope, I can. I've had at least 2 clients that come to mind that were resting on their laurels and their sales teams were resting on their laurels. So we needed to build a little fire. But nevertheless, the desired location for both that upgrade situation and that downgrade situation was still out here. This is where productivity is.
So T, real quickly, and I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll try to make the story quick. A time when I found myself at the PowerPoint, and I had just come back off the road from a very intense trip with a client, and I dropped my daughter off to school. And when I left the school, I was at a traffic light, and it dawned on me that in that moment, I had no meetings to attend. No one was expecting anything from me. And this degree of calm came over me.
Yep.
I was like, wow, man, what a beautiful place, right? And all of a
Right.
sudden, the light turned green, and I found myself back outside of the the green circle.
Well, right, because you think about it, you go like, oh, you guys have heard me say this so many times that the center of the change grid is a place where we can recharge our batteries, where we can refuel our energy, where we can clean out all the gunk. This is a place of resetting and preparation for whatever's next. If we can stay there for a whole minute or 5 minutes, or I don't even think we could, unless we really practice it. I don't know that we can stay there for any time period beyond a handful of minutes before something in our head or in our reality is going to pull us out grid or up grid or down grid. It's like life is saying, look, I gave you an opportunity to recharge your batteries. We got work to do. Get out here. Let's get stuff done, So yeah, but to be able to recognize and really utilize that moment, oh, what a great thing that is.
That's retooling and refueling.
That's what
That's
you're doing.
awesome.
What you're doing. Just remember that the center of the change grid is not compatible with human experience. Life
Right.
is lived out here. Life is about the challenges and all that kind of stuff. If we're all just sticking in the exact center of the change grid, I promise you, I'm sure there's a few, but with rare exception, humans can't handle that. It gets too boring, too routine, too, what do we say? They're not stimulated enough. So yeah. And
Yeah.
I'll finish off with my repeating a little story I share with all of you. If you guys have ever had this, the experience where everything has just been going on, it's all very demanding and blah, 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 blah. And you go, I need a vacation. All I want to do is go to a Caribbean island and sit on the beach and read my book. And so you end up going, I'm going to do that. You get on a plane and you fly to the Caribbean and you sit on the beach and you read a book and you at the end of the day go like, oh, that was just perfect. And the next day you go out there to do it again and you're kind of going like, well, this is really nice. But by day 3, you're going like, is there nothing else to do on this island? Once the batteries are recharged, once once we've cleaned out the gunk, we're kind of going like, all right, now what?
Yep.
Now what?
That's exactly.
And if we don't do something that's upgrade or outgrid, we're going to end up downgrid. And that's not a place of growth. Okay, anyway,
Exactly.
we've gone through this. So was that for the most part an interesting review for everyone? Yeah. And Nasir,
This
do you have
was
any
good.
questions about any of the content we talked about that may be new to you?
No outstanding questions. I realize that there are some YouTube videos that I'll watch that dig into the grid. So no outstanding questions, but just thank you to everyone. Amazing discussion. Really like it.
So glad you're part of our group. So all right, so again, just as a reminder, everyone, next Tuesday is my birthday. That means you have 5 shopping days remaining, and real estate is the perfect gift. So I'll be 65, so it's significant. So anyway, we'll be off doing birthday stuff on that day, but I look forward to having everybody on our call a week from today, and we'll send out a little note to that effect to remind everybody as well. So with that, thank you all so very much. Talk next time.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.